Hey Sandy, what's going on?
Hey, it's
Appreciate you coming on.
it's cold and windy. Yesterday it was 84 degrees. Today it's like 50 and windy.
Oh, is it really?
I bet it's cold up there where you are.
Yeah, it's been a little chilly. We've had crazy winds today, and the sun
Yeah,
hasn't really been coming out all that much. So,
yeah, it's dreary here.
not the best days.
It's okay. Spring's right around the corner,
Yeah, I know, right? I can't
and then
wait.
we're gonna get super busy.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if too many of the listeners out there know one or two hailstorms tends to hit Texas in the next month or two.
That's right. Yeah, and Houston already had a tornado, so
Yeah, when did that happen?
3 weeks ago
Wait,
it was bad. EF3.
really?
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy, man. I've been a little neck deep and stuff up here. I haven't even really paid much attention. I didn't know that happened.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Do they
It
know roughly how many houses got hit?
thousands of people affected. It hit Deer Park and Pasadena, which are like southeast of Houston,
Mm-hmm.
in the industrial area.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah,
Not
that
too
was
many
shocking.
residents.
That was shocking. That's like that just didn't happen down
Yeah,
here,
yeah, no kidding.
right?
Was anybody injured?
No injuries.
That's good.
It happened during the day, like around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, where a lot of people were at work or kids were in school. Of course, the schools all had the tornado warnings, and they did their little tornado drills.
Yeah,
Fortunately, nobody was injured, just a lot of
yeah.
houses damaged and some commercial properties.
Man, that's wild.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you're going to be needed here pretty
Well,
soon.
I had several public adjusters and contractors ask me, have you been down there? I'm like, why should I go down there? I'm not going to go down there. I've got enough work as it is. And besides that, I'll just let the contractors go down there. And then in a few weeks, they'll be calling me because they need help. You
Yeah,
know? Yeah.
yeah, no kidding. Well,
Yeah.
I've had a few guys ask me, are you going down to certain storms? Are you going out of state for things? And I just told them, man, I'm neck deep in stuff up here.
Right.
There's has not been a shortage of carriers shortchanging homeowners here in DFW.
That's right. And you guys have a lot more hail than we do and wind.
And we had a late one too. We had a like a 2 inch hailstorm hit just east of DFW in December, which was
That's right.
awfully
It
weird.
hit Grapevine, right? And there was
No,
a club with the roof caved in.
so yeah, there was a part of that storm hit in different spots, but there was a good chunk of the hail hit just east of Dallas, kind of in out towards like the Rockwall area.
Right.
But yeah, there was another storm that hit that like knocked down the whole grapevine. I think it was a Sam's Club or uh,
Yeah, Sam's Club.
yeah,
I saw that
yeah, the whole
photo.
roof caved in. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah. That that stuff happens up there. Houston, we get floods more than anything, but
Yeah,
yeah, but we still get some wind and hail too.
yeah.
We
How,
just
how
not
many how many hailstorms a year do you think y'all get down there in Houston?
um well, we typically don't get any like really big hail. But if there is big hail, it's usually like in Montgomery County and like around Lake Livingston, which is northeast of Houston,
Yeah,
in that pocket where you know, they typically get more storms there, severe storms there. There's just different areas like down south, of course, they have the Gulf wind, so they're going to get more storms down there.
yeah,
And where I am in Northwest Harris County, we don't get too much here. It's
yeah.
fine.
I think people around here in DFW they're pretty inoculated to the storms that come
That's
through here,
right.
but I don't think people a lot of homeowners don't understand that between DFW and up in Colorado, they're the number one hail markets in the entire country.
That's right.
So we average more hailstorms above 1 inch than anywhere else in the country. So
Right.
I think we get on average like 2.5, 3.5 storms a year, and it's a big number. So people know they get hit, but I don't think they realize how how much they get hit here.
Right. Exactly. I
So
mean, it's kind of an, it's a common thing. It's to be expected. There's storms are going to be, you have to expect them.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, I'm really glad you took the time to come on the show, and I know you and I have talked a couple times, and I just thought you'd be a really good guest to have on, and I'm really excited that you're here. So I appreciate you
Thank
taking the
you.
time to jump
I'm,
on.
I'm excited to be here.
But once you tell us a little bit, tell some of the viewers here about your company and you know what you do in the industry and kind of a little bit about your background.
Okay, so as you know, I'm a public insurance adjuster. I represent the policyholder when they have a property claim. Most of what I do is residential. I would like to get more commercial jobs. I actually have an appointment on Monday to go to Austin for a commercial claim. And then the same owner owns a building in Port Arthur. So we're going to do that one as well. I got into this industry I got my license in 2016. So it's been just about 7 years since I've been a public adjuster. And I became a public adjuster because I had to sue State Farm on my own homeowner's claims.
Gotcha.
There was a Memorial Day storm of 2015, which was really, really bad. It wasn't not a tropical storm. It was just a really severe storm in Houston. There was a lot of flooding and there was tons and tons of lightning and wind and rain. Um, and I didn't like the way my insurance company treated me. And I didn't know nothing. I didn't know anything about insurance at that time. And I learned throughout the process. And it took almost 3 years to settle that claim. And I decided I wanted to become a public adjuster so that I could help other people not have to go through what I went through. So that's why I really do enjoy doing residential claims because I like getting to know my clients.
Yeah.
And they look at me, they look up to me for guidance and I like to educate them. And so that when the claim is finished and settled, they're a much more educated consumer.
Yeah.
And
How'd you first hear like what even a public adjuster was?
well, when I was going through my claim, a friend of mine that I went to high school with, he was an IA, an independent adjuster working for the insurance companies, and he had been doing it for about 25 years. And he recommended that I hire a public adjuster. And I'm like, well, what is that? So he told me, and so then I met with the public adjuster, and um, she didn't do as well as I was hoping she would do, and she ended up rescinding her contract. But in any case, I did learn some things from her, and I learned from my friend. And then eventually, um, my claim was still in litigation when I got my license. My friend, who was the IA, he was like my mentor, and he suggested, "Hey, how about you and I study?" He said, "Because I've been thinking about becoming a public adjuster myself." So we studied together and got our license together. So it started out, he and I were partners, and it takes time before you get your name out there and people know who you are. So
Yeah.
it's taken a few years to get to where I am now. And now I mostly work solo, but I do work with other public adjusters because I need help. Um, so I have a company, but I work mostly, I haven't not been using my company name on my paperwork. I haven't gotten to that point yet. Eventually I will. Um, so I'm busy all the time. I'm like really busy. And I get calls
Yeah.
every
Uh,
day.
well, it's funny how you talk about first time hearing about a public adjuster because I hear that from my clients all the time. They're like, I didn't even know what a public adjuster was.
Right.
And I don't go to these roofing conferences very often, but the ones that I do go to, I picked something up from one 2 years ago where it was interesting just to hear the numbers of how many claim files across the country, how few of those actually involve a PA. And on the initial numbers that were like 2 years ago, it was less than 1%
Right.
of all insurance claims involve a public adjuster. And I think the carrier likes it that way.
Of
And
course.
they like people not knowing what a public adjuster is. And, in the just the last 2 years, that number has grown exponentially. It's still a really small number. I think it's up somewhere closer to like 2.5, 3%
Right.
claims involve an adjuster or a public adjuster. But I think it's just interesting how few people know what this is, and I think that's why I like having people like you on and doing a show like this, because I want people to have all the information out there. Most people don't know what a PA is until it's too late. And,
That's
they're
right.
hearing it like you did from your contractor or, a friend of yours. And if you're lucky enough to have somebody who's used one, then that's typically how you know what a PA is.
Right. Then that's I mean, I don't solicit because I don't have to.
Yeah.
Um, so my claims come from referrals from mostly contractors. They come from former clients. I've there's been times when I get a phone call from somebody, a policy holder, and they say, I got your name from such and such, and I'd never heard of that person before. You know, and like it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
that they knew who I was and they had my number somehow. That's fine with me.
Yeah.
It makes me curious. So I mean, when you advocate for people who really need help and they're ignorant about the process, because most of my clients will say, I've never been through this before, and they admit their ignorance, and I tell them, don't worry, I'm going to take care of that for you. I'm going to
Yeah.
teach you, I'm going to educate you, and you're going to be much better off.
Yeah.
And it's that's to me is a very important part of my job, is educating people.
Yeah.
um,
Well, and I think the more questions that homeowners ask, and the more things they get from whether it's a podcast like this or some other avenue, the more information they have, the better that they're going to be informed, and that way they can make the best decision. And just like not all contractors are created equal, not all PAs are either.
that's right.
The difference in that, though, is that the PAs, in DFW, there's estimated over 8,000 roofing contractors and growing on a regular basis here.
Right.
As far as PAs go, to you and me, there's quite a few PAs up here,
Hmm.
but in terms of like the grand scale of how many to feed all of DFW, there's really not that many.
Right.
And sometimes people can jump really quick to getting a PA just because they were told that they need one. They're just getting the first one that pops up. And I would argue that 80% of PAs in this industry are not approaching files the way that they should be. And
Right.
so the homeowners getting information and asking the right questions when they interview a PA prior to hiring them, or if, hey, these are some red flags, just like they need to know with contractors. It's the same situation.
Right. Right. And it's so important for you to build up a level of trust
Yeah.
from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Because if they can't trust you, then that's going to make, or if they don't trust you, then it's going to make the whole relationship a little bit tense.
Yeah.
Most, the majority of the time, I don't have that problem.
Yeah.
People
Well,
trust.
you're in this tough situation, right? I mean, you had this loss, you experienced a damage to your property. A lot of people are just like, why does nobody have my back? Why do I feel like I'm fighting the insurance carrier? Why do I feel like I don't know if I can trust my contractor?
Right.
And this whole business kind of has a reputation as well about, people, whether it's swallowing deductibles or taking checks and hitting the road and leaving. Contracting in general has its own, kind of stereotypes. So, I think when you're in this business as a public adjuster or as a contractor, the more education you have, the better it is for everybody.
Right.
And when a homeowner can sit down with you and talk about details to build that trust factor, I think that's super, super important.
Right.
And these guys are looking for a quick buck and quick turnover, and they're just looking for the next check. I those are the people that typically you can identify some of those things in the way that they talk. And I encourage homeowners all the time, ask as many questions as you want. I'll sit down with you for an hour and discuss stuff. I tell people that even if you haven't experienced a loss yet and you want me to review your policy just to see if you should have extra endorsements or maybe there's some policy language that, you don't, that I don't like, I'll review policies for free. And
Same.
I think that's super important and nobody takes advantage of that.
Right.
So if you call me up and say, "Hey, Marcus, would you mind just skimming over my policy? Let me know if I've got any issues." I would encourage everybody going into storm season right now that if you haven't had your policy reviewed, it might be worth taking a look at. There's endorsements, there's policy language changes that happen all the time. It's worth a review. Use your tools and use us PAs as tools.
Right. And it's very, very important, especially for people who, have been with Allstate or State Farm, for a number of years, and they get those renewals in the mail every
Yep.
year. Who looks at those? Most people don't. They just want to see how much their premium price went up.
Yep.
And they don't pay any attention there when it says there might be some wording, this endorsement changes the policy.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, oh my gosh, it might be one of those roof payment schedules.
Yeah.
And most of the people that I have met that had that, they had no idea they had that endorsement. They did not know what it meant.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it means that the insurance company is only going to pay a certain percentage of your roof if it gets damaged by storm.
Yeah.
And I've seen them as low as 30%. That's how they're going to pay.
Yeah. Well,
Plus,
I had another episode recently where I spoke with Sean Hodge, and we talked a lot about how important it is to pay attention to what these endorsements are. And the best position that the homeowner can be in is if they didn't cut any corners on their policy to begin with. If you and I get involved on a file and the policy isn't a good policy, it's got horrible policy language. It's got there's not very many endorsements that add on additional coverages. The homeowners are only concerned, like you said, about their premium at the end of the year.
right,
That $100 a year difference for an endorsement that could mean $200,000 worth of coverage if you experience a loss
right,
is a big whack to the chin that you don't learn that lesson until it's too late.
right.
And so I think it's the best defense that you can have as a homeowner is have your policy reviewed and make sure that there's no corners cut prior to you experiencing a loss.
That's right. And in Texas, a policyholder can cancel their policy for any reason.
Hmm.
Whereas the carrier cannot do that. The carrier has to give you so many days notice. They have to give you a specific reason why they're canceling your policy. And generally that's going to be something about your credit score or something's happened and they don't want to cover you anymore based on financial reasons, or you filed too many claims, or
Yeah.
something like that. They're going to come up with some kind of reason to to drop you.
Yeah.
Um, but you're correct, and that's really good advice. Now's a good time to review your policies to
Yeah.
see what you have and have somebody else look at it. Because most people, when they read their policy, they don't know what it means. They don't know what it's
Yeah.
saying.
Well, and what I have tried to teach people is that your insurance agent actually isn't even the best person
Right.
most of the time, because they don't actually have copies of your policy on hand.
That's right.
They sell these policies to you all the time, but they don't actually have a copy of your policy. The
Right.
only way for you to get a certified copy is you have to send in a request to the claims department and have them send it to you,
Right.
or your agent can specifically request it. But most
Right.
of the time, they're only going to have, your declaration page and maybe some endorsements, but typically it's just the deck page.
Right.
And I've actually had to ask around because I do want to have some insurance agents on the show, and I've had a tough time finding guys that are willing to come on because I've asked them tough questions about policy language, and they don't even know what the policy language is. They don't know what these endorsements do, and that's something that I've had to teach the homeowners that hey, these people don't always know what they're selling you. At the end of the day, they have a quota. They're trying to sell policies. They're trying to get you to close on a deal based on most likely what it comes down to is money. And are you $50 cheaper than the other guy? Are you $100 cheaper than the other guy?
Mhm.
And they don't always inform you about what you're giving up to get that price break.
Right,
And something that could cost you $200 a year, maybe on your premium, which isn't a huge amount, that could cost you severely on a loss if it ever occurred.
right,
And that's a huge thing that it's worth having somebody review the policy. And if you know what a PA is, or if you have one around you, they more than likely would be more than happy to review your policy for you for free. And
right,
that way they know, hey, this person ever needs me, I helped them out, and they'll probably call me if they ever experience something.
right. And it's just like, when I take on a new client or potential client, I ask them, do you have a copy of your policy? Because I really
Yeah.
need to see it.
Yeah.
At the least, can you send me a declarations page? Because number one, most of the claims I handle are wind and hail claims. So they're roof claims. So I want to see if they have that RPS, roof
Yeah.
payment schedule endorsement in their policy. That's the first thing I'm going to look for. And then if it's a water loss, are you limited on water coverage?
Hmm.
That sort of thing. After the freeze, um, it's especially with rental properties. Is it a DP1, DP2, or DP3? So DP being dwelling policy, those are rental policies. DP1s, they don't cover freezing. So I've had to tell people, sorry, you don't have coverage for freezing because you opted to get the cheapest policy you could find.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's the way it is. So it's it's not just the endorsements and the coverages, it's also what's the deductible.
Yeah.
And I have a client now, it's Allstate, and she's an elderly woman. She's in her 90s. Her deductible's 4%
Wow.
on everything.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, and they denied her claim. And it's a legitimate claim. But
That's an interesting point because I've seen an influx in this industry on carriers offering options, is how they kind of put it. And they do it in a way that seems like they're looking out for you, and they're looking out for your monthly costs. What
right,
if I can help out in your monthly costs, then I'm your friend. And these carriers are offering these 1.5%, 2%, 3% deductibles, and they're like, look at how much cheaper I got your monthly premium or your annual premium down. And to a lot of people, that seems enticing because they're like, well, what's the likelihood I'm going to get hit? What's the likelihood this thing's going to happen to me?
right.
And but then they say 1% or 2%. Oh, that's not that much of a difference. But what they don't know is that that's 2% of the
The
total
coverage limits.
coverage. So that can be double or triple the
Yeah.
amount of your
It could
out
be
of pocket expense.
$15,000 that you got to pay up front, out of
Yeah.
your pocket. And some of these, I have actually another Allstate client, and I can't remember. Yeah, theirs is 10% on hurricane. That's 40 something thousand
My
dollars
gosh.
in deductible. I heard another person who's got this multi-million-dollar home here in Houston in the River Oaks area, which is like the most prestigious. His deductible on wind and hail is 300 and something $1,000. And I'm not kidding.
You might as well be self-insured at
That's
that point.
insane. I know, you might as well be self-insured.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't even cost that much to replace his roof. I mean,
Yeah.
but that's the deductible on wind and hail. It's crazy. And I think a lot of times people just they don't look at those things. All like I
Yeah.
said earlier, and you say, people are looking at that premium price. That's no, don't shop for prices of the premium, shop for coverage and look at the deductibles and think about, would I have enough money to pay my deductible in the event that something was to happen?
Yeah. Well, it's like public service announcement time, right? I mean, if
Right,
anybody's listening to this, don't get caught up in the 2%, 3% or more deductible discussion.
right,
So the industry standard is 1%. And there's some specific carriers or some specific policies that offer things like a flat rate deductible. Sometimes if you've been with somebody for a long time and you're thinking about switching, check to see if you're grandfathered in on, like, I've still got clients that I've come across that they have $1,000 deductible
Right,
and it's a flat rate policy.
right,
That's the whole reason that they haven't switched, because they're grandfathered in. So that's all stuff to consider when you're shopping around. But if you're not dealing with that and you are just shopping the best deal, some people are, new home buyers and they're just now getting into this policy game. Just do not get into that 2%, 3% or more range. It's not worth it, and you will be in a really tough place if something happens.
right, right. And it's and then they use nothing against brokers, okay? But they'll go to a broker and they end up with an insurance policy where the insurance company is small and they use third party administrator.
Yeah.
And then that's when you really get screwed over. Third party
Well,
administrators or
and that's a great point, because I there's a lot of people out there that don't know that these initial carriers that you're talking to, the policy may not be held with that company.
Mhm.
They can sell it to what's called an underwriter, and you've got a policy covered by some company that's a foreign company, somebody that doesn't even have a brick and mortar business over here in this country.
Right,
Um, so it's important to ask these questions and say, hey, like, I want to be with a big name company. I don't want to be with one of these, small name companies that's an underwriter somewhere that I don't even know who they are.
right,
Ask your broker. I don't necessarily have a problem with brokers.
right.
There's
I don't either.
insurance agents that have, they only work for Allstate, they only work for Farmers or something along those lines. And then you have brokers that can shop, multiple insurance carriers, and then they can offer you a lot more options.
Right,
I actually encourage people, hey, talk to all of them. Talk to the broker, talk to the Allstate guy, talk to the Farmers guy, and make them all fight over you. Um,
and
and
it's better to talk to somebody in person. Not don't buy a policy online where
yeah,
you don't even talk to anybody. Talk
yeah,
to somebody on the phone.
yeah. There's a lot of questions to ask, and there's not as much transparency when you're buying a policy on your web browser. And it's good to meet in person. I'm a face-to-face kind of person. I know that's not available to everybody, but at least be prepared to call multiple people, call
Right,
multiple agents, call multiple brokers, and ask questions. And some people have options that the others don't. And then if they're not willing to answer your questions, or you feel like they're trying to get you off the phone, it's probably not a broker or an agent that you want to be talking to.
right,
You want somebody that's going to take time to sit down with you and go, hey, and bring your deck page with you from
right,
whoever else that you got a quote from. Say, hey, this is what I got from these people. Look at these endorsements. Look at this coverage. Are there any issues? Are you guys offering something as much as what they're offering? Can you offer more coverage than what they are for the same price, or maybe less? There's a lot of endorsements, such as, you know, Farmers is notorious for having like a low, a long term leak, like a seepage
yeah,
clause
yeah,
or verbiage in their policy. Whereas a company like Travelers actually has a special endorsement that you can pay for, that it does cover long term seepage coverage.
right,
If you have a pier and beam home or a concrete foundation home, there's two different types of coverages there, and there's certain endorsements that you can get that cover on-site and even off-site backup or overflow
right,
coverage.
yeah,
And there's a lot of things to ask about that and say, hey, what else can I get for my money? Am I getting the exact same coverage? Am I getting more? Am I getting less? If they can't answer you, or you feel like you're not getting an answer, go talk to somebody else.
right. And typically those, this a lot of those endorsements, they don't really cost you that much more,
Yeah,
you know? So and you're getting so much more for your money.
yeah.
So and speaking about deductibles, I actually have an Allstate client currently, and their claim is in litigation. their deductible's $250.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. But I looked at their dwelling coverages. I'm like, well, you are way underinsured. And I'm telling you right now, because they've had the same policy for so many years.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, their agent didn't increase their property value much
Yeah.
over the last few years. But, you know,
Well, that's actually a great topic too. I mean, uh, people understanding how do I insure my home?
mhm,
And, there's an estimate out there that over 75% of homes are underinsured in DFW. And understanding what the market is, you can't build a house for $100 a square foot right now in this market. So if that's what you set up your coverage for, then you probably need to get some additional coverages. A lot of companies, like Farmers is one, they have a tendency, and they even have restrictions on the agents that they can't put total coverage on the home above and beyond what they paid for it. So if you bought a house for $250,000, they can't offer you coverages above $250,000. Um, I
and I
ran
get
into that personally. I had a historic home up in the Sherman area, and I bought that house for maybe $225,000. But to rebuild that thing, I would have to. It would probably cost me $150 to $175 a square foot at that time to rebuild it, and I was like $100,000 underinsured.
yeah,
So that's another question to ask your agent is like, hey, what are you insuring me at? How'd you come up with that number? And ask questions like that.
right. It's better to, I mean, and people ask what is RCV, replacement cost value, as opposed to ACV, actual cost value. Um, there's so much um, policy language that people don't understand what they mean. So I always try to explain RCV means this, ACV means this, blah blah blah. And it's so important to always look at their policy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about a few things already. What do you think is the biggest policy issue that you're seeing in the market right now in Texas specifically?
Well, it's the deductible amount mostly.
Yeah.
Some have down here, some have just wind and hail and other perils, and then there's some that also have a hurricane. And I've seen some that have a hurricane deductible when they're not even that close to the coastline. I don't know why they have a hurricane deductible.
Yeah.
So, you can travel, of course, but I would say the deductible, and then water. Are you limited on water?
Yeah.
Uh, Foundation. Most of them don't cover foundation.
Yeah.
If they do, they're very specific about what it would have to be like some kind of a plumbing problem or something before they would pay for it. I have a State Farm claim right now. It's a foundation claim. Um, and let's see, I, those are the ones that come to mind first. And then, of course, just make sure that they don't have that RPS endorsement.
Yeah. So for anybody who's listening who doesn't know what that is, you'll hear it as ACV, RSPS, or RPS policy. Anything where you're not getting full replacement cost value. Replacement cost value is the key term there, and that's what you always want to have. But yeah, I would say the deductible issue is a huge thing that's going around right now. Another common one that I hear that it's really cheap to have. Why people don't get this, I have no idea, but it's building code coverage.
Oh yeah,
Um, it,
like
it
ordinance and law and
yeah. So I as a roofing contractor as well, like I run into this all the time where your flashings and a lot of other things can't be brought up to code because you don't have code coverage, or it can be, it's just going to be an out-of-pocket expense to you. And for something that may cost you between 50 and $150 a year, it's not worth cutting that endorsement off of your policy.
right.
The same thing will happen as if I run into an older house, or maybe somebody's had multiple roofing systems put on that house over the years, and the decking just isn't where it's supposed to be. And depending on what the situation is, whether it's repairability or whether it's a code coverage issue, redecking that roof where you basically have to redo all the sheathing, that can be covered underneath there. It makes it easier to extend coverage if you have building code coverage.
Right, right,
A lot of those flashings and all that stuff can be easily paid for if you pay for this endorsement, and that's a very common one that people, they X out pretty quick.
right, right. Yeah. And
Um,
like you said, I mean, a lot of that stuff doesn't cost that much more. So, I
yeah,
mean, like even on my car, I have extra coverage for um, bodily injury to others and stuff. It doesn't even cost that much more, Or I I have a $250 deductible. It's only like $50 more a year.
yeah,
Instead of having a $500 or $1,000 deductible, just it just makes more economical sense
yeah,
to get a little bit extra stuff.
yeah,
And then you have more peace of mind, which is actually what insurance is supposed to do for you. You're paying a price for peace of mind so that in the event that something catastrophic happens to your property, you have a sense that you're going to be okay,
yeah,
which is what everybody thinks when they do have an event. And then what happens later?
yeah,
Then they think, oh my gosh, I can't believe how badly they're treating me. And they feel like they're insulted, they feel insulted, um, almost shamed. I tell them, don't worry, they treat everybody like crap. So it's like, don't worry about it. I just tell them, don't worry about it. They treat everybody bad. You're just a
well,
number.
you and I
I
both
don't
know that
understand.
the carrier is never these carriers are never short on misrepresenting and acting fraudulently. But
Right,
that being said, they don't have to worry about that if the policy is crap to begin with.
right,
So your best defense against your back game being up against the wall and not having any course of action is having a good policy in place to begin with.
right.
You have a
Mhm.
good policy, all the rest of the stuff can be taken care of one way or another, whether that's through your contractor, through your public adjuster, whether you're in the appraisal process, or whether you're going through litigation with an attorney.
Mhm.
So, but if the policy is crap, there's not much anybody can do for you.
Yeah,
So, on some level, the homeowner needs to know that there is some responsibility on them to do their due diligence and make sure that they have coverage to begin with.
right, right.
But
And that's the other, appraisal. That's another subject matter. People hear appraisal and they're thinking real estate appraisal.
yeah,
Like, oh, it's a totally different thing in insurance. And there's a thing called an appraisal clause in your policy. And, if there's any thought about going to appraisal, I'm like, I got to read the appraisal clause because they are not all the same.
yeah,
There is the standard one, but especially in today's market, or things are changing with the appraisals and the appraisal clause. They're changing the wording to make it more difficult for the policyholder. It's the insurance companies are always going to write policies that are more favorable to them.
yeah.
There's a term for it, and it's on the tip of my tongue, and I can't think of what it's called. It's something contract. Um,
Contract of adhesion.
yes, there you go. Contract of adhesion.
Yeah.
One person, the person who's signing off on it, is more vulnerable.
Yeah. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, it's essentially where one side gets to dictate all the terms of the contract, and the other person is signing that underneath good faith that they're going to be taken care of. So if there's any ambiguity in the contract or in the policy terms, that ambiguity rules in favor of the homeowner or the property owner, because they're not the ones who dictated the terms of the contract to begin with. So that's a little bit more verbiage of explaining the contract of adhesion.
Right.
But but yeah, so um, no, There's so much to think about when you're going through this process, and I think so many people are so quick to just getting coverage and getting done. And I'm hoping some people listen to this and maybe get a better idea of how to approach shopping. So, and
Right.
I tell people don't be one of these people that thinks, hey, I've been with these guys 30 years and I've never filed a claim, so they're going to take care of me. Um, the reality is that your agent has nothing to do with the claims department. They have
That's
no interaction with each other.
that's
And
right.
just because your agent has helped you out and they've been with you for a long time, it doesn't mean that the claims department is on that same viewpoint, and it doesn't mean that they're just going to jump to whatever it is that you need to get
Right.
done.
Right.
So a lot of people don't understand that dynamic either.
That's right. And I tell people that all the time. I say, oh, your agent is a salesperson.
Yeah,
They're selling a product to you. They just do the sales. They don't do the, you know, backup, making the promise come true.
yeah,
That's the claims department.
yeah.
They're on a totally different wavelength.
No, and
All about spending as much money as little money as possible.
yeah,
Let's write up an estimate that's under the deductible. And I've seen them where they've been like 40 cents under the deductible.
yeah,
So we're not paying you anything. Seriously. I had
yeah,
one like 42 cents below the deductible. So then we're not paying you anything.
yeah,
Could you just like add a little bit, to that?
yeah. No
Give me
kidding.
50 cents.
No, and I tell people too. I say shop every year if you want to.
Right.
You don't have to build some long-term relationship with the carrier in order for them to pay you when the time comes that you experience a loss. They're the ones who are evaluating that risk. And they evaluate whether that happens now or whether it happens 30 years from now, and what's the likelihood of you experiencing something catastrophic and large.
Right.
That's what helps dictate your premium in a certain geographical area and the likelihood of something happening. So
Right.
I tell people, look, in a market that is not loyal to you, don't be afraid to not be loyal to the carrier and shop. And if
That's
somebody
right.
else is offering something better for a better price, take that deck page and your policy information that you get from one, take it to another, and see, hey, can you beat it?
Right.
Um, and just shop around. I encourage that highly.
Right. Shop around, educate yourself. And then when you're looking at the coverages, okay, so you you think this company has got offering of nice coverage, great coverages. The premium is not totally crazy.
Hmm.
And then the next thing you do some research and look up customer service with that
Yeah,
insurance company. Go to Facebook and see if they
yeah,
have a Facebook, or maybe there's a Facebook page, I hate State Farm, or All State sucks, or there's Marcus, there's a lot of Facebook pages where
oh
you
yeah,
know USAA victims. I mean, there's a whole slew of them, and I'm a member on a lot of them. And I've helped people. They'll say, I'll say, I'm a public adjuster. Maybe I've even offered to talk to them on the phone and give them some kind of guidance. I'm not
yeah.
trying to solicit to them, just trying to offer them some help. Um, but that's very important too. Do some research and see what their customer service looks like. See how they rank as
Yeah.
far as insurance companies go. And most people are shocked when they see the 10 worst insurance companies.
Yeah. No, and I tell people too that that's always kind of a changing dynamic too. So the
Right.
carriers are not always the same across the board throughout the history of their company.
That's right.
So these carriers go through. I just kind of do an analogy like a roller coaster. They kind of do these ups and downs of what they prioritize in their business model. There's a certain number of years that they're prioritizing their shareholders, and they are really strict about what they're approving, how often they're doing it. These items are going to be things that we're going to be leaving off estimates over the next so many years. There's times that these carriers say, hey, we're going to try this, and if we get away with it, then it's going to end up being, X amount of dollars at the end of the year that's more profit. And then the flip side of that is where they cater more towards customer service, and they cater more towards getting fresh clients in, and they retain as many clients as possible. An example of this, in my opinion, would be, Farmers has been going through a more customer service side of things in the last in the last 2 years since COVID. They've been a little bit more lenient on how they're approving files on the front end. They're still a little strict on the estimating side, and they're not paying for everything that they should. But overall, in the claims process, I would say that they've kind of geared more towards customer service. Whereas on the flip side, with USAA, in the last 2 or 3 years, their customer service side has gone downhill like crazy.
It's bad.
They are not paying claims. They're not paying claims, period. And when they do, it's significantly underpaid.
Right.
State Farm is going through a phase just like that right now as well. They're they're not paying out claims like they used to. It's a lot more difficult to get a roof bought in a hail and wind claim.
Right.
But Allstate prior to 2 or 3 years ago, they were really difficult to deal with. I've heard that they've made some CEO changes, and I've actually heard that one of them went to USAA. That's why there was a flip on that
That's,
side.
that's not true.
Whether that's true or not, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's not. I did my research and it's
Did
not
you?
true. The
But but
the
I would say like Allstate, they still do their soft denials, and they still do some of those tough denials. They know that X amount of people aren't going to do a reinspection. They know that X amount of people don't know what a PA is. But we have a really high success rate of overturns with Allstate right now
right, right,
because of that. And then they'll go, oh, well, they got a PA, okay, or they got an attorney, okay, well, we'll pay it now.
right.
And their customer service tends to switch a little bit once you get a certain person involved. So every carrier goes through these stages and of these kind of ups and downs of what they prioritize.
Right. And a lot of times it changes quarterly, when they get their financial
Yeah.
situation quarterly, then they might, they're either going to tighten up on claims and not pay them, or they're going to be a little bit more lenient. Um, but getting back to USAA really changed when they got the CEO that they have now. And I
Hmm.
think been with them for maybe 5 years or something. And he's the first one who has no military background.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you should see where he lives. His house is like phenomenal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah,
Funny
very
how that
cool.
works out, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
But
it's interesting if you put just a time clock on this visual, right, of when that person gets hired, and then you just start seeing what the company prioritizes since their involvement.
right,
You know as well as I do that there's a connection there.
right. And I know the names of the CEOs of insurance companies, and because there's one particular third party administrator that's kind of large. And it was after the freeze, and I had two of those claims. And I wasn't getting any kind of communication with these desk adjusters. So I found the CEO on LinkedIn and I sent him a message. Two claim numbers. I'm a public adjuster. These are two claim numbers. I'm not able to get these adjusters to communicate with me. And at the end of the day, I had calls. I got two phone calls.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he got the message to them somehow. I'm like, yay, good for you.
Yeah.
And actually, a CEO who actually paid attention, because I could see on there that he read my message.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, sometimes I'll be having an issue with the desk adjuster because, that's our biggest opponent. It's the desk adjuster. And I'll include the CEO of the company in the email.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, that usually gets some attention.
Oh yeah. No, I'm sure that's a quick response too.
Yeah. Uh-huh. They're like, oh, yeah. So I do. I love to do stuff like that. I like to mess with them.
No,
I like to give them definitions of words and
yeah, and I tell homeowners that all the time too. That most of the time these guys have tactics. A lot of times they get overloaded as well. Sometimes it's not always malicious. Sometimes these guys are getting pulled from other states and they just get a workload on them that is ridiculous.
right.
Um, but I tell homeowners all the time, there's a game and tricks of the trade of how to get responses back.
That's right.
There's ways to, A little trick I like to do is, if I'm not hearing back from somebody or if I'm not getting a call back, I'll just call the general claims department and I'll navigate to somebody in there, not the actual assigned adjuster, and I'll one get their supervisor's information, but two, they have an internal system with note taking. And what I'll do is I'll have the general claims desk say, "Hey, would you put an urgent message on their desktop to give me a call back and deal with this?"
Right.
And typically, I'll usually get a call back within about 24 hours.
Yeah.
But and the same
But
thing is I'll
you have to be pretty creative. And that's the
yeah.
fun part about being a public adjuster is being creative. I love improving my negotiation skills. And I do come off like when you're reading my emails, I'm sure if you have half a brain, you can detect a tone of smartassness in my read. And I love it. I had one client that he wanted to be copied on all the emails. So I'm
Hmm.
going back and forth with this desk adjuster with Allstate. And my client said to me, wow, it's like you two are playing chess and you're 5 steps ahead of her, 5 moves ahead of her. I'm like, "Oh, and he's like, I just think it's fascinating what you do. I love your job. It's so cool." I'm like, yeah, it's fun. It can be fun, but it's really stressful too, right,
Yeah.
Marcus? It's stressful.
No, it is very stressful. And I had to learn a long time ago in this business that I can't take things personal. And I used to get upset. I used to get really riled up. Like, man, is this guy just out of his mind? Like, what is he thinking making this decision? Like, why is he not getting back to me? All yada, 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 yada. And it took me a while to understand, like, look, these guys have 9 to 5 jobs, just like everybody, most people in this country. They don't want to bite the hand that feeds them. They have families and people that rely on them. And, a lot of times they're just doing what they're told.
Right.
And and sometimes I use that to my advantage. I say, okay, well, if you're look, I understand you got a boss too, right? So is it your boss who's saying this, or is this you who's saying this? And
Right.
they go, well, I'm the messenger, man. This is just what the policy says, or this is what the my supervisor says this part of the policy means. So okay, great. Why don't you give me your manager's contact information?
Mhm.
And then that name goes on my complaint
Right.
because and I'll use that a lot of times, and a lot of people just you you gotta, like I said, I stopped taking it so personal, and I just started looking at it from a business perspective, and I looked at it as my whole business is the problem business. I am in the business of solving problems.
That's right.
You can't be
Finding resolution.
surprised. Yeah, you can't be surprised that somebody's gonna try to shortchange the homeowner. You can't be surprised that they're gonna deny, delay, defend all day long. And once you kind of get that mentality underneath, your responses don't come back as emotional, and you just look at it like, look, I can't make you do anything, and I'm not going to try to, but I'm more than willing to let yourself step into your own trap. And look, if you want to walk into this and you want to misrepresent this, just understand that I'm giving you an opportunity to overturn this decision. I'm giving you an opportunity to make this right. And if you don't, I want you to understand that you're knowingly making this decision.
Mhm.
And typically, when I use that verbiage, knowingly, you are knowingly doing this,
Mhm.
I'm usually getting redirected to a supervisor or somebody else, and
Right.
because they don't want their name on it.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, I know. I just love playing with them. It's fun. Because I'm always friendly and professional.
Yeah.
And when I talk to somebody on the other side on the phone, I'm always professional and very friendly. I'll say, I'll just kind of start up a conversation. So, how's the weather where you are? Just start talking. And wow, you sound like, do you have allergies or something? Just get kind of on a personal level with them and get them to open up. And, I like to treat people, like, they're human just like I am.
Now hold on a second. You opened up our conversation talking about the weather. Are you playing mind games with me? What are
No,
you doing?
no, no. So, but in time, then I get them to open up. So I'll build up some kind of rapport with them. But in the end, they're going to know I'm a hell of a lot smarter than they are. And that's kind of my attitude. I am
Yep.
smarter than you, always will be. And nothing you can say or do is going to make me change my mind about whatever. I'm going to pursue this and I'm going to win one way or
Yeah.
the other. I'm going to win.
I,
And I want so bad to say, well, just give up now. Okay. Just pay the claim.
well, and if you've ever worked for me as a PA, if you've ever worked for me as a roofing contractor, you've usually heard me say this analogy, and this whole industry is a game.
Yeah,
Know what the rules are, know where the line is, walk it if you have to, but don't cross it, and play it harder and smarter than the other guy.
that's right.
And when you think of it in those terms, I feel like it changes your perspective a little bit. And I've even told homeowners that. And I've said, look, this whole thing is a game. You can either be a participant or a spectator. But if sometimes if you don't know what's going on, you can get taken advantage of. And in my opinion, it's better to be an educated participant and know what these rules are, know what could be coming around the corner, and that way you're not taken as much by surprise.
Right,
I'm not expecting everybody to be an expert on this stuff. That's what we're here for,
right,
but at least have enough education that you can do your due diligence and get a good policy in place. That way, you and I aren't restricted when we do get involved on what we can get you in terms of results.
right. Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
but I mean, in this industry, I mean, we've been talking a lot about you and me and PAs and adjusters. Do you feel that a lot of these adjusters are educated enough in one construction and then two just their own knowledge of their own software that they use? I'm referring to Xactimate, which is the estimating software that they use to determine how much money you're going to get.
In general, no, they're not. They're
Yeah.
not that educated. And you can tell they'll say the same thing from one company to another. They all have the kind of the same little thing, guidelines.
Hmm.
They're guidelines that are not in the policy. They'll say, "Oh, well, it's against our guidelines," or "These are our guidelines." And you can just tell by the verbiage in their emails and how they'll deny something for this particular reason. And Allstate does it this way, State Farm does it another. But you can tell it's their training,
Yeah.
or they're not trained that well. For the most part, they're not trained that well. I'd
Yeah.
say the majority of them have no construction background. Um, their estimates, some are fairly good, but they're usually are missing lots of line items because they don't think of they're more focused on the amount of the estimate, not the scope. And I tell my clients all the time, don't pay attention to the amount on the estimate. It's all about the scope.
Hmm.
This has to happen, and that's what makes a good estimate is when it's a good scope of repairs.
Yeah. Well, the estimate in terms of pricing, and for those who don't know, there's a software called Xactimate, which is kind of the industry standard, and this software basically takes average market pricing of materials and labor in a certain region, and it applies it to a list of code items,
Right,
and you use these codes to build a scope. So we don't dictate the price of the removal and replacement of a piece of L flashing. We just put the code in, and then that software basically uses that regional pricing to put in its place. There's
right,
sometimes you'll have one-off items that you have to do, special pricing on, but that's far and few between. But the software though, these codes, it's very common that the carrier leaves off line items that restricts what you get in your scope. They'll say that a roof replacement only takes 6 line items to do, when in reality, when somebody like Sandy or I send in an estimate, it's going to be 30 line items on a roof, on just like the roof portion.
Right.
So one, they don't know the details of Xactimate. So the PA that works with me as well, the both of us are getting our level 3 certification in
Okay.
Xactimate. Only about 250 people in the entire world have that certification.
Right.
Um, but we took the time to go in and really understand what is the meaning of a lot of these line items. That way, it's not just stuff thrown up against the wall. But it's important to have a good scope because that's what dictates the price.
Right.
Um, so I tell everybody you're in a lot better of a situation when you have all the money on the table. If they're paying you pennies on the dollar, you got way less options to do with you and your contractor.
And
Uh,
then your repairs are not going to be adequate because
no,
no contractor wants to be losing money on a job.
yeah, no.
They don't want to be losing money.
No, and the kind of more on the construction side too, like you said, most of these adjusters don't have a construction background. So if you're not going to have a PA involved from the beginning, I would say that you need to have an advocate on your side somehow during the claims process.
Right.
So if you're handling this where you and the adjuster are on site, you're not going to climb that roof with him. He's just up there by himself and you're expecting he's going to take care of you. I don't recommend that. I recommend you have somebody representing you and your best interests
Right.
there.
If it's not a public adjuster, a contractor.
Yeah. So
Find a decent contractor that
yeah.
has a good reputation.
The adjuster who's there on site is not there to look after you, the homeowner's best interest. They're
Right.
there to look out for the carrier who is their employer, and they're looking out for their employer's best financial interest. You need somebody to be an advocate for you on site during that inspection. That way that they can kind of help guide that guy around. Um, because of their lack of education in the construction side of things, having a contractor there is going to be one that's going to be the first guy to point out, hey, you're not paying for the right underlayment. Hey, you're not paying for drip edge on this. Why are you not paying for that? Hey, there's valley metal here. Did you get a picture of the valley metal that's there? Hey, it's not valley metal, it's ice and water shield, or it's mod bit used in the valleys.
Mm.
What's the waste percentage that you're putting together on this? Why are you only giving 10%? My calculations are at 17%. Did you understand that the chimney cap is a three-piece chimney cap? It's the chase cover, the flue, and the decorative chimney shroud.
Right.
It's having that guy there going through all that, going, "Hey, don't shortchange us. We need answers on paying for all these things."
Mm.
So,
And and actually, the adjusters in the field, I rarely have any problems with them.
mhm,
Unfortunately, they don't have the control that they once had. There was a time when adjusters would come out um, and do an inspection and write a check right then and there and hand it
yeah,
to the homeowner. That doesn't happen anymore.
not nearly as much.
Not nearly as much. I've only had it happen to me once, and it was an all-state claim, and it was a reinspection, and it was a major hailstorm up in the Trinity Livingston area, and so they did a reinspection. Well, great, and then so I showed up, and then this truck pulls up, and I go, "Oh, you field adjuster?" He said, "No, I'm the ladder assist." Ladder assist is somebody who gets up on the roof and actually takes pictures so that the field adjuster doesn't have to risk their life on the roof. And so he says, "No, the field adjuster will be here pretty soon." So about 10 minutes later, this other truck pulled up, and I said, "Oh, so you're the field adjuster?" "Yes, I'm the field adjuster." And I said, "Great." He said, "My manager will be here in a few minutes." I'm like, "Wait a minute, 3 against 1."
Bringing the whole team out.
They were bringing the whole team. It was just me. And as it turned out, they saw more damage than the contractor saw, and they wrote a check right then and there.
Yeah,
And I was like, "Yay, why can't all my claims be like this?"
yeah.
Yeah, that's the only time
Well,
that ever happened to
and
me.
that's true. I tell people from the very beginning because they all want to know, hey, how long is this going to take? How extensive is this going to be? And I tell them, unfortunately, it's a roll of the dice.
Right,
I said, it all mostly comes down to what adjuster you get.
right,
And I said that's whether I'm involved or not. And typically when I submit my proof of loss or my package, it typically gets reassigned to a new adjuster and it gets fresh eyes on it, and
right,
then we go through the reinspection process and all that fun stuff. But
right.
um, you know, it's all roll of the dice nowadays. And the carriers are in the process of pushing out old adjusters that have been doing this a long time, the people that you mentioned that have a lot of authority, the guys that know how to write a proper scope, the guys that used to be able to cut checks on the spot. They're trying to get rid of a lot of those
And
guys.
they had integrity as well.
Yeah, exactly.
They had
Well,
integrity.
it's no surprise as to where they're going after they get pushed out either. They're coming over to the public adjusting side, they're coming over to the appraisal side,
Right,
contracting side.
right.
They're all coming over to the Jedi side.
And they make really good public adjusters too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because most of them do know policy language and things like that really
Right.
well. They
Hmm.
know how to write a scope. They know how to investigate properly, take the proper photos. So they do tend to
They know
make
what's needed.
great
They know what the
public
insurance
adjusters.
companies need. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I always say that I think the best public adjusters are former IAs and
Hmm.
um and contractors.
Yeah.
A lot of contractors too.
Now, and when I first got into this, I needed to learn more about policy, and I wanted to learn more about what are these endorsements, how does coverage give coverage and then take it away later. Um, where do I find certain policy language? And a lot of times I learned that from really nice independent adjusters on the carrier side.
Hmm.
When I first got into roofing, I learned a lot of things from really good quality field adjusters on the carrier side.
Right.
That's why, I still have an open mind when I go out, and I still try to treat them with respect because you never know what you're going to learn. There's always somebody out there who knows more than you,
Right.
and I always look at it as an opportunity to learn something.
Yeah, and then and I think if you're grateful for any kind of knowledge they can give to you,
Yeah,
I do believe in building up a rapport with my opponents, my adversaries. I just think it's just going to be work better. Right? I can reason with them. We can come to some kind of an agreement. Then, just being harsh from the very beginning and going there like a bulldog, that shit just doesn't work.
yeah,
It doesn't work. And unfortunately, there are quite a few public adjusters who just want to be really hard and difficult, and they want to be bulldogs. And I think it's shameful, to be
yeah.
honest with you.
Well,
But
and
another thing I think that I find myself, clients will say, especially when I first meet them, I'll say, "Okay, do you have a denial letter?" And they'll say, "No, they just told me on the phone. They're supposed to give it to you in writing."
yeah.
I go, "Really?" "Yeah. They have
Oh,
50
it's
days to
law.
accept or reject your claim." So I tell them, in your policy in Texas, there's a Texas Consumer Bill of Rights. I suggest you pull it out and you read it,
Hmm.
because you will know that you do have certain rights. And your insurance company is supposed to treat you fairly, and just go through the list, of all the things that says and what your Bill of Rights are, and check off the things that they're not abiding by.
Yeah,
And you know because if the insurance company is handling your claim poorly, and then you reach out to get an advocate, whether it be a public adjuster or an attorney, and you let them know, look, this is what I have documented, that they didn't do this, they didn't do this, they did this, blah blah blah, whatever it is, it makes our job easier, because we can hold that against the company.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, and I to kind of piggyback some more on, I think people really underestimate the detriment that it can be to your claim settlement if you don't have an experienced person who knows how to read policy, and knows how to write scope.
Right.
And having an adjuster without an advocate, like you mentioned, can just be detrimental to the whole process.
Right.
For instance, I had a water loss claim. It was a the area that it affected in terms of surface area was pretty small, but it was a water line on the back of a refrigerator, but it did damage to the kitchen cabinets and the wood floors and the wall. He has a completely open concept house. The claim was originally denied. Um, they tried to use some policy language. I got involved. They overturned it, but they only paid out like $30,000 worth of damage. And I just settled that claim at like $205,000.
Wow.
Um, so for people that don't know the detriment, a lot of times people just take what they're given
That's
and
right.
they don't know what to fight for. They don't know how to fight. They just kind of take what they're given by these guys. And, what I had to explain to this homeowner was that, look, your cabinets are custom. There's no ability for us to do a repair on this. The open floor concept, the continuation of paint, the continuation of wood floors that goes out throughout the entire house. You're going to have to get all of this replaced. And once he realized that, he was like, "Well, then yeah, let's do it."
Right.
And I think having somebody up on the front end that isn't educated can just do detrimental damage
Right.
to your claim. And and you know this very well, but if a homeowner brings us on and it's not worth our involvement, we don't have a problem telling you that, and we'll come out and inspect it for free. Like,
Right.
guys, I'll come out there and look at it for you,
Mhm.
and we'll sit down, we'll go through everything, and I'll say, hey, you know what? Like, I've done this numerous times, guys. Try this, and I think y'all can get what you need.
Right.
And you don't have to involve me. I don't have to take
Right.
a fee off of this. Because a lot of times I'll look at it and say, if I get involved and I may add another, 5, 10 grand to this, is it worth me taking this amount of a fee? And I just tell them, like, look, why don't you just try this and then, see if it works. And if it doesn't,
Right.
then give me a call.
Right. And I do the
And
same thing. I mean, I offer advice to people for free, and that's part of my job. It's part of my profession. It's as an advocate. I don't always get paid.
yeah,
you know, it's nice. It's rewarding to help other people,
yeah,
and they're very grateful to you.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I would, I have a feeling that that's probably your favorite thing in this industry is education and that part of it.
Yeah, and doing things for people. I actually had a client, and this really touched me very much. Got a client, their roof was completely denied. No, actually, it was like well below the deductible, and it's been going on since like May of 21 or something. So finally, we got a reinspection, and they paid for the roof. So they're so thankful. And so I had their checks, and I met them at their bank, and she's hugging me. They both hug me. I'm a hugger anyway. And then, we they deposit their check. She gave me my check, my 10%. And she says, Sandy, if it wasn't for you and God, I don't know what we would have done.
Yeah.
Wow, she got me up there with God. That's pretty cool.
Uh, uh,
And he said, I love you, Sandy. I'm like, oh, I love you too. That's good.
yeah.
It's very touching when people show that much gratitude
Well,
that you are their hero. I mean, I've had them say to me, "You're my superhero,"
yeah.
but you're going to forget about me down the road. Okay, so just take that moment and cherish it.
Well, if the loss is a big loss, like they had a lot happen, or if they feel that they were wrongfully handled to begin with, and then you stepped in and got changes made, it it's really rewarding to them. And a lot of PAs and contractors in this industry talk a lot about what a big claim is. And to most people, something happens to their house, that is a big claim. And to the PA or to the carrier, it may be a $30,000 claim, something that's on the lower end. Um, there's a lot of PAs and attorneys that don't take business unless it's over a threshold. They don't do
Right, exactly. And
anything
I've had
for
to say,
you.
I'm not taking anything under 250,000. I'm like,
Yeah,
damn.
exactly. I've heard numerous attorneys and stuff. They don't even take cases
Yep,
underneath 1 million.
right,
They don't take cases underneath 500,000.
right,
And I just kind of look at that and I'm like, you know what? Like the people that are supposed to be the advocates, if y'all don't help even these people, and that leaves a very small pool of people that are willing to help out, people, which is most of the people who need it.
right,
Most of these people that have insurance claims are underneath $100,000.
right.
And at least that's kind of my guess. I don't have data to support that, but I would say that a good chunk, if not 50% or more, of insurance claims across the board are probably underneath the $100,000
Oh yeah,
threshold.
I would say so. They're under 100,000. It depends upon what it is. I mean, it's like a roof, then typically it's going to be under $100,000.
Yeah,
Now, a freezing claim could well, get
yeah,
closer to 200,000. It depends upon the house and how many rooms were damaged and all that stuff. A fire, of course, that's like the worst.
yeah,
Flooding, which is a totally different animal. Um, but it is true, and there was somebody had asked what quantifies as a large loss, and my
mm,
comment was it's relative to whoever who has the loss.
yeah,
Every loss is a large loss to the individual. So how
yeah,
can you put a number on it?
yeah.
You know,
Well, you mentioned earlier, like you're pretty much all residential, so you don't have any caps, right? On anything, you don't have any
no,
threshold.
I don't.
Like you won't.
I've actually done a couple of car claims too, auto
Yeah,
claims. And there's not much money in those because we can't do bodily injury. We can't do third party liability.
yeah,
Um, there's not much money. I mean, I did one just pro bono, just to help the guy out. His
yeah,
car was stolen. But, I, because, because if I help somebody with this small claim, like if at their house, it's a $10,000 claim, I'm not making much money off of it. And it's usually just as difficult as the one that's
yeah,
200,000. It takes just as much work.
yeah,
And roof claims really are the hardest because the
yeah.
carrier, that's not wind damage, that's not hail damage.
Hmm.
um, and those are really difficult and you don't make as much money off of them. But I'm planting a seed. This way I look at it. I do right
Yeah,
by somebody, and someday I might get a phone call from somebody that they gave, my name to this other person. And that's how you build up a reputation, and um, your referral sources grow
yeah.
when you do good things.
We're because we're the same way. We're majority residential claims,
Mhm.
but we do large loss and commercial projects, and we do quite a bit of it. But I've had somebody ask me before, Mark, so from a business perspective, how do you stay motivated when 1 minute you're working on a multi-million-dollar claim, and then you turn around and you got to pay attention to a $20,000 claim.
Right,
And I said, well, if I have to like kind of differentiate on that, on like my time and all that, I think it's my job to figure out on the business side how to balance that. From a mentality standpoint, it doesn't change.
right,
So from me evaluating what has happened during a claims process, applying, prompt pay deadlines and looking to see if they've misrepresented things in my investigative process. It is
right,
no different on a 25 square residential house on a hail and wind claim as it is to, a multifamily apartment building that burned down, that burned.
right,
So my process is the same, but it's my job as a business owner to keep the motivation between myself and the staff on how you stay motivated between these multiple claims. Because we just wrapped up a $1.4 million roof up in the Frisco area,
oh
and
nice,
it was way less work than it is on some of these. residentials.
Yeah,
I got to
right,
go out and do three different inspections, and my fee, it might come out, hardly anything.
right,
And but at the end of the day, sometimes, like you mentioned, those smaller ones can be way more difficult than the big ones.
right,
But those people need you
right.
just as much as the other people do.
And I
So
think it helps to keep you grounded
yeah,
and, realize that you are, and to be humble because you are an advocate. And, there are plenty of public adjusters and attorneys who are very particular about who they're going to advocate for. It's all about the money. Um, but I don't see it that way. To me, I mean, of course, the money is nice. And, I'm not allowed to pay my bills and everything, but I feel comfortable knowing that I'm doing something that has meaning and purpose.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's awesome.
And it gives me a good feeling about myself, you know? Yeah.
Do you think a homeowner should hire a PA on every single claim that
No,
they do, or no?
no. Um, Most of the claims I get it later, you
Hmm.
know, after they're having a problem.
Yeah,
I am signing up 2 commercial claims this next week. Um, and the claims haven't been filed yet. So we're going to be on board from the very beginning, and that's going to be nice. And usually, most of the time, if you get on board from the very beginning, the public adjuster is on board from the very beginning, the process will typically run smoother.
yeah,
Okay. But most of the time, well, because people don't even know public adjusters exist,
yeah,
most contractors do. The contractor will try to get it resolved. And then, when they hit a roadblock, they're like, oh, let's bring in a public adjuster. And some contractors, well, I'd say most contractors who have used public adjusters have had some bad experience with some public adjusters. I get a lot of contractors calling me who have had bad experience with other public adjusters. And then some contractor, somebody they know in the industry will say, hey, call Sandy Davis because she's pretty good. And, after all these years, I have a pretty good reputation. And, I just tell them, I'm honest with them. I'm like, don't expect me to be a miracle worker.
yeah,
know, Number one, send me photos.
yeah,
And like sometimes I'll look at them, I'm like, I don't know what am I looking at? Where's the damage?
yeah,
And I get a little bit frustrated with the contractors or their sales reps who don't really know how to take photos. And I've met with um, contractors, gone to their office and try to do some training and teach them what it is that I need. Number one, I need really good photos. I need you to send me the photos, and then I'll decide whether or not I think I can
yeah,
help you or help your customer. And that's the process that I do. I'm going
yeah,
to vet. I'm not going to take a claim that's not a legitimate claim.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. And we're for the most part we're the same way. But if I were to recommend something to somebody, if you can be indemnified and brought back whole without our involvement, then
right,
I would say it's not necessary for you to have a PA on from the beginning.
right. Mhm.
Most hail and wind claims can usually be done between you and your contractor.
That's right.
It's usually not until the contractor hits a roadblock or the carrier is just blatantly misrepresenting something and calling your bluff on how far you're willing to take it that I get a phone call.
Mhm.
Um, but that being said, if it's something more along the lines of a fire or water loss claim, and you think it's going to be fairly complex, I think there is an advantage to having a PA on it from the very beginning.
Right.
You touched on it already that a lot of times the process itself can be a little bit smoother just because we're not going to take any crap from the carrier,
Right.
right?
And we understand how the process plays out.
Yeah, yeah, and
And like with fire claims, they're different because the insurance company is going to bring in a fire investigator
yeah,
and they're going to go through the process. They're going to probably want to get an extra 30 days to investigate because they're looking for arson or
yeah,
the possibility of arson. So that's why it's really like if it's a fire, it's best to have a public adjuster from the very beginning because the public adjuster knows what's going to happen. And, they might want to do I can't think right now. They might bring in their SIU, their
Hmm.
special investigations unit. They might want to do an examination under oath.
Hmm.
People are like, what does that mean? They don't know. And
Yeah.
so the public adjuster can be educating you and say, this might happen. This is probably what's going to happen next.
Well, and
And
there's,
heads up
yeah,
on what's
and
going to take place.
your public adjuster is going to know from the beginning too that, hey, we're going to need somebody like a hygienist on this from the very beginning of like a water loss,
Right.
or maybe the water damages as a result of the firefighters coming in and putting the fire out. That this hygienist report is going to be a huge difference maker in how easily the carrier is going to approve certain things.
Right. Yeah.
It's a lot more difficult to do that when it's 6 months after that happens and you've already mitigated and taken out a bunch of materials that weren't tested. And now I have to go back and somehow prove that it was category 3 water.
Right.
And there's a lot of things with that, that there's some advantages to having a PA on from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tell everybody, if you're dealing with fire or water, if it's in more than one room, you're probably needing to get a PA
Right.
involved.
Right.
Um,
I would totally agree with you. On
yeah,
those types of losses, it's better to have a public adjuster.
yeah. And if you're in something like a hurricane or a tornado, having an adjuster who knows how to navigate, is this falling under TWIA? Is this falling underneath your carrier? Um, there's advantages to having us involved from the beginning. But your average hail and wind claim, it's not necessary to have us on from the beginning. Typically you'll just call us, when you need us, kind of thing. So that's typically how I approach it.
Mhm.
But um, what's your, because I know a lot of PAs, everybody kind of treats their process a little different. There's PAs in this business that they have a quick turnaround. If you're not done in 45 days, they send it to an attorney. Um, there's other PAs that try to stretch out, or maybe they're overloaded and they take a long time on their process. There's other people that try to exhaust every avenue and then they only turn to an attorney if and when they need it. There's PAs that are turning to appraisal to get their job done for them. What's kind of your take on some of those
I
processes?
don't have a time limit. I you mentioned one. I send to an attorney or recommend an attorney when when I've hit a roadblock
Yeah.
and the carrier's not going to budge. And but I always make sure, and I start every file from the very beginning as if it's going to go to litigation.
Yep.
Most of them don't. Okay, most of the time I get them probably 75% I get resolved without an attorney. Used to be much lower, but you know, nowadays the carriers are getting much, they're stingy
Yeah.
and greedier than they have been. But I will have evidence in my file. I'm always looking for it. I'm
Mhm.
looking for them to screw up, and I like to set them up for it. I'll ask them questions. I want to make sure that what they said to me is um, what they meant to say. So I'll say, it's my understanding that you said such and such. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you're just admitting that you've been handling this claim improperly, that sort of thing. So when I send it to an attorney, I have all this kind of evidence so that the attorney can at least has a fighting chance of not only getting the claim paid in full, but also getting the fees paid on top because
Yep.
Texas is a bad faith.
Yeah. And for any of the listeners that, want to understand that a little better, because I've had another video with Hodge where we've kind of talked about teeing a file up. And the reason, and I like that approach with you because not every PA has it. And you have to treat every single file like it's going to litigation.
Right.
Because if you don't, there's going to be some piece of evidence that you missed. There's going to be something that you didn't cover, and it's going to set the file up for failure if it does go to litigation.
Right.
If it doesn't go to litigation, awesome. No harm, no foul. We get it resolved. The homeowner moves on down the road. But if it needs to go to litigation, you didn't cover one of these things,
Right.
it could be detrimental to your case.
Right.
So you need a PA that approaches every single file the exact same way in terms of how they structure the claims process, in terms of how they go through their claims process.
Right.
Not every process is the same, but what I'm saying is just their approach to investigating needs to be standard across the board. Like
Right.
their approach to how they handle claims, how they structure, how they set up prompt pay deadlines. Are you evaluating misrepresentation of certain parts of the policy?
Right.
Like what different things are you doing in that process? And
Yeah,
that's
but
really
and
really
that's what the
important.
thing is. I'm always paying attention. I'm always being aware of everything, and documentation is key. And um, document everything, and then always be looking for those little mistakes they make or the things they might say, and you
Yeah.
know, so I can hold it against them.
No, and I my process, I would be like you. I'm probably 75-80% of our files get settled without going anywhere else. But we I only send to an attorney if and when there's no other options.
Right.
So if I go, eventually I'm just going to come to the homeowner and go, hey, look, we've given them every opportunity. I've escalated it to one supervisor, two supervisors. They're all giving me the same answer. Um, they violated prompt pay deadlines. They're misrepresenting this part of your policy. This, or this. If I'm sitting there going, they're just blatantly misrepresenting, they're acting in bad faith. I have proof of all of it. They're calling your bluff on how far you're willing to go. That's when I'll have the conversation with them about going to litigation. I tell everybody in the beginning and up front. I like to set expectations up front.
Right.
Guys, it's not my expectation to go to court, but it's always a possibility, and you guys need to be aware of that because I don't want to come to you one day and say, "Hey, guess what? You got to hire an attorney," and then they go, "Well, what? I thought that's what you were there for, right?" Um, so I tell everybody up front it can always go to litigation, but it's not my intent. I don't like to turn it over to the attorney. Even if I don't get every penny that's on my estimate, as long as you're whole and the contractor has what they need, my fees are covered, everybody's happy, then I've done my job. I don't have to send it to an attorney for minuscule other things if you end up getting it done.
Right.
So um, I don't like appraisal very much.
I don't.
And that there's a big push of appraisal in this industry right now
Yeah.
that I think homeowners need to be a little bit aware of, and I think that's discussing appraisal is a whole episode in and of itself. But
It is.
the short of it is, it's the Wild West. There's no regulations, there's no laws, there's no certifications or licensing of the people who represent you as an appraiser or the carrier. There's no rules and regulations at all. So there's no question of why the carrier is wanting to push things to appraisal. Once it's in appraisal, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get out of appraisal.
Right.
So once you're in it, you're in it.
And it's
Uh,
binding.
yeah. So people need to be aware of that, and they need to be a little more cautious than what they have been. And the other key factor about appraisal is that just because the appraisal agrees on an award does not mean that the carrier is going to pay that award.
That's right.
Just because they agree to it, they can
Mhm.
always go back and say, well, there's a policy issue. We can't pay this award for some reason.
Right. Right.
And
Exactly.
there's too much at stake. And it's going to come down, I think, and the whole thing's going to crumble. And when that happens, who knows? But I think it's on. I think it's coming.
Right. And appraisals can drag on for a long time. And, it's in my experience, I I just don't like appraisal for all the reasons that you said. It's like a crapshoot.
Yeah.
But I do the same thing when I sign up a new client. I tell them, okay, this is my process. This is what I do. This is how I handle things. Be patient because it's not going to be settled in a month, and it's probably not going to be settled in 2 months. My average is probably 5 to 6 months.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, if it goes to litigation, then it's going to take even longer.
Yeah.
But I just tell them there's this, these are the possibilities.
Yeah.
Now you have another option, that's appraisal. And I explain the appraisal process, and then I'm honest with them and I say, personally, I don't like appraisal because like all the reasons you said. Again, I try to educate them from the very beginning. I tell them nothing is guaranteed, and we just have to go with the flow and see what happens. But if we need to go to an attorney, I will let you know beforehand.
Yeah.
Before I'm just not going to just like super surprise you. Go, okay, I'm done with this. Let's go to an attorney. I always want my clients to communicate with me, tell me what they're concerned about. What is it you're concerned about? What's making you worried, or that
Yeah.
sort of.
The play on words that I use is you guys are in the driver's seat. So as we're going through this, y'all make the final call.
That's
So
right.
I'm going to stress certain directions for you. I'm going to advise you on what I think is going to be best and our highest likelihood of getting a win. But y'all are always in the driver's seat. So I tell everybody, I said, look, if I write an estimate for $200,000 and the carrier comes back with 100,000, and I'm going to bring that to you, and I'm going to say, hey, look, I wrote for 100,000. They gave us, or I wrote for 200,000. They gave us 100. Evaluate this, look at it with your contractor. Let me know how it's looking, and I'll tell them like reasonably, like, hey, look, if I can get us to 150,000, can can the carrier or can your contractor get it done? And I'll have open conversations like that, because if I can get them to a certain number and at the end of the day it makes them whole, then I've done my job. So at the same time, that $200,000 estimate I wrote, I can defend every line item up to a jury trial if I have to.
Right,
But at the end of the day, my job is to get you back to pre-loss condition. And if you can do that on $150,000 instead of my $200,000 estimate, then I've done my job. So,
right.
but you're the one who makes that call. You're the
That's
one
right.
who's in the driver's seat. So, that's how I always want my homeowners to feel, is like they're in control.
Oh
So,
yeah, definitely. It's all ultimately it's up to them.
yeah,
And usually what I'll say is, I've learned to say this, because there's this thing where people will say, if a public adjuster recommends that a client of theirs goes to an attorney, they're giving them legal advice, and that's practicing law without a license. Let's go to extremes, but there is that, you know, thing out there in this industry that public adjusters shouldn't be recommending, giving legal advice by suggesting they go to an attorney. So what I've learned to do is I say, if I was in your shoes,
yeah,
I would go to an attorney.
yeah,
So that's just telling them from my perspective, if with based on my knowledge and my experience, if I was in their shoes, this is what I would do. But it's up to you. You're the ones going to decide.
yeah. No, that's good, and I know the carrier likes it that way. They try to put as many holes between the contractor and the PAs and attorneys as they can.
Right,
Who telling has a pretty good analogy in terms of putting the property owner on an island, and he does this kind of the scale balance analogy where the carrier has money, influence, research, all this stuff on their side that builds up their side and who they have it to their advantage, and they put as many roadblocks between the property owner and and their side as possible. So they like to keep the homeowner on this island where nobody's there to help them. They're putting up issues and roadblocks between them and the contractor. They're putting up roadblocks for PAs operating in whatever state that they're in, and they're making it where attorneys can't advertise directly to homeowners, and that's
right,
all by design.
right.
So, like you said, it all comes down to education, and the more the people know, the better. That way, they can make the best decision possible.
That's right.
But
Yeah, it is. It's all about education.
yeah,
Everything's about education. if you're in a situation where you have to make some decisions, especially major ones, better educate yourself.
Yep,
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah.
Well, Sandy, I really appreciate you coming on, and
Sure.
this has been absolutely awesome. So I
Well, thanks for
definitely
having me. I
definitely won't be the last time I have you on either.
okay, sounds good.
But no, it's been great, and appreciate you coming on and everything, like I said. And guys, appreciate y'all listening, and we'll catch you on down the road. Peace.
Sounds good.